Welcome to the Fantasy Aceball podcast. This is your host, Tim Kanak. You can find me on X at Fantasy Aceball. And you can also follow on the YouTube at the Tim Kanak. You can spell that Kanak, the last name, the Tim Kanak, if you want to find me on YouTube and watch live. And if you are watching live, you'll see I am not solo. I have good old Matt Morris from the Dynasty Dingers pod after his partner Doc got completely trolled by wearing a good old Western outfit for good old Doc on the last podcast. So we got to get the partners back to back, going from Doc to Matt Morris here. You can find Matt at Matt_E_Morris on X. And where else are you at? Do you have other platforms too, Matt?
No, I'm just rolling on X. It's been years since I started podcasting, and we've kind of jumped around from TikTok to Instagram. And with fantasy baseball, I think we're probably in agreement. It seems to be the best social platform if you're not on Patreon or on other paid sites, just for community interaction.
Oh yeah, for show. Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. That is where I put all my stuff because I am lazy and don't want to I don't want to have like 10 different places that I have to post the same thing 10 different times. That's annoying. Unless we got like a nice little thing, like pre-podcast, we were talking about real estate. Like, for instance, Airbnb. If you have Airbnb, booking, whatever, they're all supposed to counter migrate. So if you get a booking on one of them, there's a nice little button you can hit, and then it's supposed to rebook on all of them. I actually had a little oopsie on one of my platforms where it did not coordinate properly and had a double booking at one of my places and had to mess with that the other day. So that was fun. But and that would be ideal. If we could get that on social media, then I'll get all the other social medias. But until we get the little button that allows me to post on one thing and then it auto-populates on all the others, no, I'm not doing it.
A partner and I tried a third-party service, and it was the engagement concept was, we will do all of your posting from all platforms. We will schedule them out. It was reasonable. I want to say it was $30 a month. And this was probably 2021, 2022. We were really trying to push our like generalized sports podcast. And we did it for about 2.5 weeks. And what we would find is it would hit one post on X. The next post it would hit on TikTok and X, but not Instagram. And over the course of 2.5 weeks, it just continued to have a choppy delay. And it was like, this is to your point of the concept. The concept is beautiful and it really helps content creators, but it doesn't work. And we were just kind of salty and bitter over it. So we didn't even try a secondary third-party resource. And I'm in agreement with you. If I could find one resource that allowed me to post on Blue Sky, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, on X, and I just set it and forget it and schedule it out on Monday, be amazing. But I have not found a product that works yet.
No, nothing good. If someone is good at coding, do it. Make some money. You can make some money. All right. If you are watching on the YouTube, you just saw pop up the spreadsheet, the lovely spreadsheet of all the players with, again, the colors that I'm not going to tell you what they mean. I'm just going to make you guess. I'm not going to explain them. They're just there. And you can assume what green and red mean and blue and all the colors. I'm going to make you guess and try to figure it out as the podcast rolls along. I want that, like, this secondary conversation going in your brain. What the hell do those colors mean? I have to figure this out as you're listening to us talk. So we're starting with number 75, where we left off with Doc. And number 75, you have Augustine Ramirez, and I have Cole Young. So we have a little red line here. Uh-oh, what does that mean? Oh, my God, a red line. Okay, so Augustine Ramirez, I have to talk about him with you for a second here, Matt, because I am pretty high on Ramirez here. I've got him in the 30s. Let me look exactly where I have him real quick. I have him at 37. And this is a guy that he started the season a lot stronger. And when he went to the Marlins, we saw kind of a little bit of a slowdown at first. And then he kind of caught back out, caught back on fire right at the very end of the season. But when he first went over to the Marlins, there was a little bit of a lag. I don't know if that's like a thing where you just got traded, you're moving, you have new coaches, you have a new place to live. That might be something like that, but he was awesome for the Yankees. There was a Yankees coach even that said that this dude is going to be like a superstar, that he's one of the best guys to come through the organization, one of the best hitters. Power, speed from the catcher position, 25 bombs, 22 steals, 53 extra base hits. I know he's a catcher, but 75 seems a little low to me. So I want you to explain to me your ranking on Agustin Ramirez here.
Yeah, and I'm glad he's our first one. And while you were talking, I wanted to go through my ranks and just make sure I didn't trip myself up here. Going through my entire top 100. I do not usually rank my catchers high on my top 100 unless I'm projecting potential game-changing ability, right? A William Contreras and Adley Rutschman, just because it can be such a volatile position. We saw the guys like Bo Naylor, Ruiz come up recently, Gabriel Moreno, like kind of disappoint what the prospect projections had for them, or in reality, kind of just hit the mark. So I think some of us were over expecting performance from them. And so because of that, I have lowered catchers in my ranking. Now, Augustin Ramirez falls kind of right in line with what I like from just generalized players. Opportunity with the team. We see that in Miami. It's pretty glaring if they don't give him the job. That I think raises a question mark to me, but I do think he has a shot out of spring to make this team and be the catcher. I love the power. The speed I have question marks on, right? I think we might get that speed at the major league level, maybe 15 stolen bases. If we can get 20 from him from a 1 to 3 year range, that's amazing. My only concern and why I don't have him so aggressively ranked is because I genuinely believe the comments made by the Yankees hitting coach / organizational representative was a sales tactic. I would lean back on like what has the Yankees developmental system for hitters really produced over the last few years is like my gauge for maybe concern. We have Dominguez coming in this year and has done okay in 80 some at bats at the major leagues, but outside of that Dominguez flash, I just haven't seen enough from the Yankees organization to make me believe that their development track is proper. So I'm a little bit cautious with Ramirez, but I do think he's somebody that I could see move up my ranks very aggressively. And it's also kind of a counterbalance. I did have him, I want to say, in my top 20 midseason. Like I overextended myself. So I do like his profile. I am partly concerned though about the lineup in Miami.
Yeah, I get that. But the good thing is that like you mentioned, he probably will play. He has a good
Yes.
shot to break out of spring. And with the Marlins, when he hit the Marlins org, he actually spent 22 games at catcher and 17 at DH, which tells you that they really like that bat. And if you're drafting a fantasy catcher, one of the most important things you can get is at bats and regular playing time. So if he is the type of catcher where they love the bat so much, and I mean, he averaged in the low 90s for his average exit velocity, which is really good. So if they like that bat that much, then hey, if you're going to get full at bats out of it, if you're going to have like a Salvi Perez situation where he's DHing or maybe playing a little first or something when he's not catching, there's a lot of value in that if you're trying to get a catcher that is going to get playing time. Like Wilson Contreras, for instance, right now is sky high on value just because everyone's like, oh, he's playing first base. He's going to get 600 plate appearances. How many other catchers are going to get 600 plate appearances?
Yes.
Maybe William Contreras, maybe Cal Raleigh, and that's it. So, those type of guys that are going to get playing time have a lot of value. And I think that that's the type of guy he's going to be. Other hand here, we've got Cole Young. I don't want to spend too much time on Cole Young. I'm pretty down on him. I had him in the 40s before, last year at this time, just because I really liked what he was doing on an age to level. Like he was, I think 19 or something in Double A 2 years ago, and when you see that, and you can see that he's holding his own and getting on base with that, like that good of age to level, you'd think, okay, there maybe is something here. But the problem is that the power and speed have not developed. So I think he's going to be a good hitter. He might be good for points leagues, but like on power and speed, I don't know. What's he going to be? Like 10, 15? Like that's not really interesting in a roto league. But points, I think, there's a good points league player here. What do you think?
Yeah, I put Cole Young, Marcelo Meyer, some of these shortstops that are lacking that real power tool, and let's just say an elite level sprint speed or stolen base track record, kind of in the same bag where they're not as attracted, they're not as attracted to the overall progressive scale that we like to see, and it's hard to rank them. But these are the guys that start at the middle infield position of your 20 teamers, right? These are the guys that you need to give you a decent floor so that you can take some higher risks on guys around them. And I think Cole Young, we have a lot of like prospect fatigue on, just because we have been expecting that jump from him. But I do see a big league starter. I think you're right on line with what the expectation should be. And I always comp guys to Dansby Swanson because Swanson's just like the least
Vanilla.
sexy. Yeah, he's vanilla. But in deeper leagues, you need a guy like that. And I think Cole Young
Yeah.
probably has a better batting average, probably has, less home runs, maybe right on par with stolen bases. Um, and key here, he might be in a good lineup. Like if Emerson can develop, if Montez can develop, if Farmelo can develop, he's in that lineup. So there should be good counting stats around him. But if those guys don't develop, it's the opposite, right?
Yeah. I had a Geraldo Perdomo comp on him. If you
I think
like
it's plausible.
base points. Yeah, exactly. So next, number 74, you have Jacob Wilson, which I have Jacob Wilson at 69. Bada bing, bada boom. So we got Jacob Wilson really close together here. And then I have Luis Angel Acuna as my 74th player. So Jacob Wilson, great hit tool, kind of like what we were just talking about with Cole Young. He's a great hit tool, good plate skills, but what's he going to do besides that? Power and speed are kind of iffy. Maybe you get, I think this is probably the best case scenario. If you can get Steven Kwan at shortstop
Yep.
out of Jacob Wilson, that's stellar. That's great. That's a fantastic points leagues player. In Roto, it'll play. It's not great, but it'll play. There's nice depth. Maybe he's not your starting shortstop, but that'll play in middle infield, especially if you pick like Max Muncy or Kyle Schwarber and need a nice little batting average boost. That's the type of guy. That's the type of team build that Jacob Wilson is going to be useful for you. Luis Angel Acuna, who I actually, the first go around on my rankings, I completely forgot that he was still a prospect. I was like, oh, he's in the pros. And I was like, oh, wait, he did not qualify. So Luis Angel Acuna obviously had a nice little run for the Mets at the end of the year. But I plugged him into my F scores, and he still rates below average pretty much across the board in everything except for speed. Now, I think he could be useful. Like in my rankings for Dynasty, I've got him like right above Tyler Black. So like I think he has a way better shot at playing time than Tyler Black. I actually like Tyler Black's plate skills better, but I think Acuna has a little more power in the bat. And there's a point where you're like, okay, Acuna is more aggressive at the plate, so he might strike out more, but he also might get more hits, which is going to lead to more steals. And if you're drafting Luis Angel Acuna, you're drafting him for steals. He is not going to be Ronald Acuna. When you're picking Luis Angel Acuna, you're maybe hoping for like 12 to 15 bombs with, even though he had a lot of what did he have, 6 homers or something in his little Mets debut? He had a lot of bombs for some reason in his little debut, but that's not how he's going to be. But probably 25 steals, 30 steals, something like that as a like multi-position utility guy. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm seeing Super U there, right? And I think you said it best. Like he has probably more tools than Black does. Black being in Milwaukee with that infield and that kind of roster construction has a really hard time seeing playing time, especially with the acquisition of Durbin. And Acuna on the other side could be the super utility for the Mets, right? Depending on what Ronnie Mauricio and Brett Batty say. And I think that's the hardest thing. Both of these players that you mentioned have playing time concerns, but Acuna has the better like skills profile, has a decent glove, has the speed attached to him, right? That's awesome off the bench. I think you'd rather have that on the bench than Brett Batty. And he's a switch hitter still, is he? Or is he only right-handed? Acuna, that is.
I believe he is a switch hitter.
I thought he was. I'm going to reference that, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I think that gives you that versatility that you're looking for in the lineup. My question coming from
Righty
a
only.
dynasty, righty only. Okay.
Yep.
Question coming is like, what does 2026 in New York look like? Is there opportunity at second base? Like, is Jeff McNeil off this team finally? Do you have the opportunity for Mauricio or Acuna to step in? Because I'm in the same boat you are. I have Acuna in like the 90s. I do think we could have a nice player if he can develop at the major league level. You're right. He's not his brother, but he could be, again, back to the middle infield, set him and forget him. Could be a really nice player for you. 250, 260, like you said, 30 stolen bases in deeper leagues. That's a really nice asset for where his current cost is.
Yeah, exactly. And then Jacob Wilson, 74. I think, you and I have him kind of in the same range here. Do you have anything to add on Wilson?
He's just not my type of build player. And that's just kind of how I like to approach the game. I like to be a little riskier, and I don't like to pair that risk with floor a lot of the time because of the cost of that floor. I have Quan in a couple of leagues and I don't love having him in there. He kind of keeps me in that like middle of the competition road. And I'm also always going to be a little bit bitter about where he was taken in the draft. I think there were better upside names around him to rebuild, the Oakland, Las Vegas, Sacramento A's. And when they took him, I just I thought it was a tank mentality move. So
It's Angels move.
it was a
Get him up
bad
quick.
pick.
Angels.
Yeah, yeah. I did. I looked at it as, they're genuinely trying to have a poor organizational depth chart so that they have more reason to leave the city. Because if you look back on some of those drafts for a 3 or 4 year period, they had a lot of questionable decisions within their draft. And then all
Mhm.
of a sudden they start taking Nick Kurtz. Like, I'm sorry, you don't just flip a switch after you got approval to leave the city and start drafting properly. So there's an emotional distaste there, and I'll admit that.
Yeah, I think he's still going to be a good player. From like a real life perspective, he's going to be a good guy. Like you
Yes.
want a guy at the top of the lineup who's going to get hits. So 73, you have another athletic here, Colby Thomas. I can't even say in Oakland A's anymore. A
It's hard,
Sacramento
I know.
Athletic. You have 73 Colby Thomas, who I have in the same range. I've got him at 57, so we're pretty close on Colby Thomas here. Even though a lot of the underlying metrics on Colby Thomas are quite bad, such as like swing metrics and like his chase rate and stuff like that is all quite terrible. This dude, for whatever reason, just always makes contact. So let me pull it up real quick because Colby Thomas, let me see, 27% line drive rate last year, but only a 78.4% zone contact, which is pretty bad. He's got to have just like a ridiculous sweet spot percentage. So even in my F scores, like 95 contact, 58 discipline, which is like not quite Davison De Los Santos, but it's down there
Close.
as
Yep.
far as plate skills. But the dude had 80 extra base hits, Matt.
Yep.
How do you like 80 extra base hits? So how do you, when you look at a profile like this, you're like, okay, um, what are you going to do with this? The dude, no matter, he's an extra base hit magnet, 31 bombs, 15 steals, very useful player here to hit 277. He's just super aggressive in the zone and he's really good at barreling. Like he's a really good barreler and that's his main skill. So like when I look at him, I'm like, okay, this guy reminds me of Taylor Ward and Adolis Garcia mashed into one player because he has that Adolis profile where like I don't know how he's making it work because his swing decisions are so poor, but the dude is yoked and he's just making extra base hits happen based completely on athleticism and aggressiveness. And Colby Thomas seems to just have this like thing in him where he just barrels pitches, just 80 extra base hits. That's insane. So I have him at 57, while you have him at 73. And then I have Cam Smith at 73, and you've got Cam Smith at 40. Um, Look, I really respect everything that Cam Smith did last year in his little small sample size. When he was drafted, I was like, oh, there's better players here. But then because the thing is, like, he was like kind of like a one hit wonder in college. He was not good until his last year in college and just really broke out and then kept it rolling once he hit the minors. And we saw what he did. And now he's in Houston, where that's probably the best ballpark that he could go to for his profile because he is a pull hitter. So that's going to really play up for him. So I love that for him. But I would like to see another year because everything basically good that he has done was 2024 college and 2024
Yeah.
minors. So I would like to see a little more from him before I bump him into the top 50. And that's really the only thing holding me back because I really like him. And my comp for him is Josh Young. That's kind of like what the vibes I get. I just want to make sure that we have like good Josh Young, not like constantly injured uh, Josh Young type coming here as like a Cam Smith comp here, because this plate skills are kind of like below average. Contact tool rates about average, power rates slightly above average for me, and he actually does have a decent, a little bit of speed. It's not terrible. Like he might get 5 steals, 6 steals, 7 steals. He's not going to be a zero. But that's my thing on Cam Smith. What do you got on these two guys?
Yeah, I'm just gonna swing back around for Cam Smith because I'm in agreement with everything you said, and where he falls in my rankings is right after big time question mark guys for me. I got like Jordan Lawler right behind him at 41, Christian Moore at 42, Chase DeLauder in that environment of Colorado at 44. So for me, it was more when I looked at those guys, it was like, okay, what are their question marks? The question marks either environment, swing, or health. And it's like, okay, Smith had only done it in 1 year, but he was young for level at Florida State. And I don't like the level that he excelled at with the Cubs because it was lower minors. But you said it, environment in Houston, I'm banking on. So he's a really hard one. He's too young. Like right now, I'm probably open to trading him in a lot of different, facets or leagues. But I was aggressive with him. Kind of swinging back to Colby Thomas. I think he could be great if they give him a shot. I haven't looked at organizational depth chart of where Oakland, Vegas, Sacramento is, but I think this might be one of the last seasons that they can really roll him out there for 120 games or 400 or 500 at bats and let him struggle, fail, and then kind of make those adjustments at the major leagues where he is one of their outfielders for the next 4 or 5 years as they make that transition to Las Vegas, because that's the kind of player you want when you transition to Vegas, right? That all or nothing guy. When we look at track records around the minor leagues and major leagues, it's James Wood, it's Ellie De La Cruz. You mentioned Delison Dalva Santos. Like those guys will be given a shot either because of their team context or their prospect rating. And they're going to have the opportunity, like they have, to find their game at the major league level. But when you look at Thomas, it's like, do the A's really give him that shot to find those adjustments in the major leagues? I have him a little bit lower in the 70s just because I don't know what the organization is really going to do with him and how much time they're going to allow. And that's hard because I love that kind of game. On a bad team, I want to see a guy go for the bleachers every single time.
Yeah, and Seth Brown is the only thing blocking him right now, so he could be up relatively early on like a proximity basis too.
Yeah.
So if you're the type to give proximity bumps, like this is a guy that could be up really early in the season, if not break camp, just because Seth Brown is friggin' Seth Brown, right? And it's not like the Athletics are going to go out there and find someone else at this point. Yeah. So the other thing too to think about Colby Thomas is like the Athletics. I know we were just making fun of them, but they've actually like the last year. They've had a little magic in that water, right? Like they brought in Nick Kurtz. We saw Lawrence Butler completely turn his career around and develop a hit tool out of nowhere. So with these gains, it makes me think, okay, maybe they hired someone finally in their developmental part of their program that actually knows what the hell they're doing and is figuring things out for these guys. And maybe they'll figure out something for Colby Thomas, or maybe they figured out something for him already. And that's why he has this like magic ability to just barrel balls at like a ridiculously high rate.
I think we're going to see this organization go from a laughing stock to a competitive team because of what you just said. They simply started doing what a business should do, as opposed to trying to fail their business, right?
Yeah.
Like it was pretty apparent that they were actively trying to tank. And last thing I'll say about Oakland, Las Vegas, Sacramento is the difference a real closer can make on a bad team. You look at the White Sox last season. I don't know the number offhand, but the amount of games they lost in the ninth inning because they had absolutely nobody to roll out and really win a game was a difference of like 10 to 15 games. You don't have that with Mason Miller anymore. He's not allowing you to lose 100 games because he is going to stop those losses by just locking down the ninth. This could be a fun team in just a year or two here.
Yeah, I think so too. 72, you have Braylon Payne, which I love. That's what the little blue thing marks. See, I told you I would hint. That's our little turquoise. I love that because you're super aggressive on him. And I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that I'm the one that turned you guys on to Braylon Payne on the podcast that we did on Dynasty Dingers on the FYPD pod. Maybe I'm wrong though.
Your opinion matters more than most, and I mean that in the industry. My bias of being a Brewer fan is what like started my love for Payne, because I've got Brewer novice that are just talking about his exit velocities and him being 17, and it's like yeah, okay, like I need to hear it from somebody in the industry before I really start to buy in, because all of that's just chatter.
Yeah, and Welsh is the one who really turned him on, because Welsh saw him in Bridge League, which nobody has access to unless you live in Arizona and can just show up on a regular day and like watch dudes just hit the ball around. But Welsh saw him in Bridge League and told me like, hey, this guy is legit. Like that's like the guy that he was talking up at the very end of the season the whole time on P1. So Braylon Payne, I love that. I love the aggressiveness with that, because like I ranked him at like 101 and I'm like, there's no way anyone else is going to rank him this high. And then here you come, here comes Matty Moe at 72. And then, so I have Caden Dana here at 72. You actually have Dana quite a bit higher than me. And I was kind of shocked to see someone actually had Dana, because I feel like he came up, got roughed up, and then everyone's like, this guy sucks.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And like is dumping him now. But they forget that he was 20 years old doing what he did at AA, which is insane. It's just unfortunate that the Angels are terrible at developing their players all the way through, and they call them up before they're fully developed, because that's exactly what happened with Caden Dana. Because, and this is one of the things I talked about on Prospect One all the time with Welsh, because he was like, well, I think Dana is like a mid-rotation guy. I don't know how great he's going to be. And I was like, yeah, but look at him in the lower minors. In 2023, when he was in A-ball and high A, as a 19-year-old, he was rocking like 16% swinging strike rates. And then last year at Double A, as a 20-year-old, the swinging strike rate went down to 12.6, which is still decent. That's not terrible, right? 12.6 is like what is good still. It's not fantastic. It's not 16, but the dude is still really young for the level, and he made the majors as a 20-year-old. We saw what happened with the Braves when they brought up AJ Smith-Shawver as a 20-year-old. It's not good to push these pitchers above their means. They're not ready. They're not ready. Well, while I completely agree with skipping AAA, I think the right move would have been to just keep Dana in AA until we saw that swing strike rate climb back up to a level that he was doing when he was in the lower minors, because it's obviously in there. He has good pitches. He has a 94 to 95 mile per hour fastball. He has an insane power slider. Like, he needs another pitch, but he has two really, 2+ pitches. He just needs a third pitch to go with him. And he's very good at controlling the zone and not giving up a lot of damage, because he had a .94 whip and a 2.52 ERA as a 20-year-old in Double A. So the dude can be good. Now, I tried, just like how you mentioned with catchers, to kind of like temper my pitchers. So I think I only have like 20, I don't know. I have like 20 pitchers in my top 100. Whereas like at this time last year, I had like almost 40. I just love pitchers, and especially because like I'm in Jupiter, so I see them all come through A-ball and make at least a couple starts. Usually they'll at least, it doesn't even matter. Even Paul Skeen's pitching A-ball for a start, right? So like everyone pitches an A-ball at some point. So I love the fact that when I can actually get eyes on some of these guys and see them, whereas like some of the really good hitters like Travis Bazzana just went straight to high A, and so did Charlie Connon. So those guys I'm never going to get to see. So I will, because I get to see them, just push pitchers, but I'm trying to avoid doing that. A little bias of like, visual bias. But what are your thoughts on these guys?
I mean, at 36 for Caden Dana, I love him. I think when you're talking about the profile you want out of a pitcher, a volume-based guy, which is a way of the past, he's giving you an opportunity to see potentially your volume-based starter come back, at least with the Angels organization. I mean, 146 total innings in 2024. You talked about some of the dominance he had at Double A, even though he wasn't meeting the metrics that he had put up at the lower levels, right? His K9 went down. His walk per nine also went down, which I thought was a huge piece of the equation. If you look back at 2023, his walk per nine was at a 4. In 2024, he was able to bring that down to a 2.6. So yes, he lost a little bit of that strikeout per nine, and you had mentioned it, some of the swinging strikes. I think we'll get that back as he develops. At 20 years old, we just don't see organizations aggressively push these guys into the innings total that we saw from Dana. And to me, that means maybe he gets a shot out of spring, maybe not. Maybe they bring him back down to Double A, like you said, for more development, or maybe he gets a AAA assignment. But either way,
I hope not. PCL.
yeah. And that's another thing. Like, if you look at that organization, they've really been trying to avoid putting their pitchers in the PCL, where they've almost been rushing them to the majors. And my drawback on that is, why not just choose a different route? Like, a number of organizations that are in the PCL have done the same thing. It's like, well, if they're not able to develop because of their environment, a change needs to happen. And I get that proximity is important, especially at the AAA level, for a call up if it's an emergency. But if you're not using that for development, you're doing a disservice to these guys. So yeah, I think Dana is a guy that is undervalued. He's probably closer in real prospect ranks, in between our ranks, but I love the profile. I love volume pitchers. I lean points biasly because that's what I've played in predominantly for the beginning of my fantasy love. And a guy like this in points, even on a bad team, is going to chalk up those innings, which will lead to strikeouts. And if he's minimizing damage, you should get quality starts. The wins will be a problem, I think, in Anaheim.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so 71, you have Thomas Harrington, and I have Seaver King. I'm not going to get too much into Harrington because I already spoke about him with Doc and with Welsh on the last two podcasts. So this is what I call a little forced teaser here. If you want to hear my takes on Thomas Harrington, the control artist, go ahead and listen to those podcasts. But Matty Moe can come in here with his take. Seaver King is another guy that I've already spoken with Welsh on the podcast with the Welsh. Seaver King, by the way, speed demon here, I think. And I think there's more power in the bat. That's all I'm going to say. I think there's power and speed here from a guy who could play short, could play third for the Nationals at Brady House, because you got CJ Abrams there. So I like King a lot. I think that he has a very good hit tool with power and speed, even though we didn't see the power in his little minor league stint. I think it's there. So that's why I may be higher on Seaver King than others, because he did have 16 home runs at Wake Forest in college. I know it's an aluminum bat, but you don't go from 16 to 0. Maybe you go 16 to 10 with a wood bat, but you're not going to go 16 to 0 here. So those are my little takes on these guys. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I like King a lot. I don't think he made my top 100. I was just kind of scrolling through to make sure. The question mark that you just brought up with the power is what I want to see this year. I love the overall profile. I think we have a starter here at the major leagues if he can give us, 10 home runs this season, because the speed's going to play. And, traditionally speaking, the profile was supposed to be a good average. And again, lineup context, this should be a fun lineup, especially after they take whoever they pick at number 1 this coming season. This should be a very strong group come 2028. And King may be a vital piece of that, because I'm out on Brady House. I wouldn't take him for a 5th round pick. I just don't think he plays. And that's a very strong opinion that doesn't need to be cemented. It just is what it is. So opportunity potentially for King. And then for Harrington, I think you put him on any other team, he's probably higher touted than he is with Pittsburgh, which is strange because Pittsburgh has done such a good job developing pitchers, but he's almost overshadowed by the Paul Skeens, Bubba Chandler, right? Like you put him on Milwaukee, God, maybe the top 40 prospects, because he could be their number 1 pitcher in 2026. But because he's behind those two horses,
Henderson's better. Don't worry. Logan Henderson is better. I got you.
Thank you. But the control concept there is really important. I think in the Pittsburgh organization, he really helps that lineup or the pitching rotation change a pace. When you have Jared Jones with the high fastball velocity, Paul Skeens as well, Chandler leans on a similar profile. Harrington in the real game is going to give major league teams a changeup when he pitches, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. I think, and I mentioned this to Doc, I'm just going to say it real quick. I'm thinking Harrington is up before Bubba Chandler. So everyone who's buying Bubba Chandler in redraft expecting 120 innings or whatever, I think you're going to get a nice little nasty surprise when Thomas Harrington gets the first call up, and we don't see Chandler until like July or August.
I like that take, actually.
Yeah.
I really do, because this rotation is going to be unbelievable.
Yeah,
It's going to
be
be so
insane.
good.
And they've got Hunter Barco, and they have Braxton Ashcraft. They've got a bunch of guys.
Do you think Ashcraft long-term bullpen?
Probably, because they have too many guys, and
Yeah.
I think Barco's better. So
Okay.
I think Barco's going to overtake him at some point.
Okay.
So number 70, you have Christian Scott, which I did not include in my rankings. And in my ranking, I put a little note, and I was like, this dude is so close to being not a prospect, and now he's out for the season. And I don't want to just rank him as like a dead guy in my rankings for a year because he has Tommy John. So I just completely nixed him from my rankings, which I think your ranking is very fair. I had him at like 25 or 26 or something like that pre-injury. And then obviously now he's missing a year. So I think it makes sense to ding a pitcher 40 or 50 spots or something like that because of an injury. I still like him long-term. And actually right now is probably the best time if you're in a dynasty league to buy him. You could probably get him for next to nothing in most dynasty leagues, just because he's like kind of under the radar. He's going to be forgotten. Everyone's on Sprout now or Chandler or whatever, or they're on to the next pitcher. I think Christian Scott is a nice little sneaky pickup that you can get in some dynasty leagues. And I have Joandry Vargas here because I didn't notice him on your ranking, and I made him blue because I was curious to where you have him, because I think this dude is going to be a stud. Complex last year, 303, 406, 493, 12% walk rate to 23% K rate roughly, 16 extra base hits, 4 bombs, 11 steals. Complex, obviously, they're not playing full season. When I watch this kid, it just reminds me of like Bobby Witt like his stance and everything. I'm not saying he's going to be a Bobby Witt, but I'm saying that like that's when I watch him hit. That's the feeling I get. That's the guy that comes to my mind when I watch him hit. I think though that skill set wise, he's going to be more like a Jordan Lawler. So I think you're probably going to look at like Jordan Lawler ish numbers for Vargas once he starts hitting full time ball here, because he should be an A ball probably this year to start. Maybe he gets promoted to high A. And he's the Padres, so he'll probably be an A ball. And he's a Dodger, so he probably won't come up till he's 25 or 26 years old. But I think that you've got like a Jordan Lawler type skill set. But just watching the dude hit, like mechanics wise, I just think of Bobby Witt for whatever reason. But have that. What do you think about Vargas? Like, where do you have him at?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Vargas and Tate, who we're going to get to in a little bit, I would actually loop them into a similar bucket as Kalaz, who I have in my 30s. The problem is for me, Kalaz, I've watched. I have a feeling about. I'm going to be by nature um, more outwardly excited about. And Vargas just last year, especially in Dynasty Draft, was a very highly sought after target because of the numbers he had put up. I like what he is. I'm just really trying to find in the industry the right place to rank DSL and complex, because it is so incredibly hard to have an opinion when you are either usually leaning on the numbers alone or scouts take, or like you had said, maybe the videos that you watch. I don't have that right balance yet. And when we talk about Tate, it's interesting because I have a reference point with Kalaz. Like Tate actually has better numbers than Kalaz and is younger, but yet I have Kalaz ranked higher, and I stand by that. I think Vargas, I have it in my notes, he could jump 50 spots from outside my top 100 into my top 50 by June. Like I just want to see him at a level where I really know how to gauge the numbers, because for me, complex and DSL is just all over the place, but the skills are there to make a huge jump.
Yeah, I think complex for hitters is easier to relate. DSL for hitters and pitchers is all over the place when you're trying to correlate, and complex for pitchers is not good for correlation. But I feel like complex for hitters, you can kind of get a little bit of a correlation, and like at least like I made correlation charts for each jump from level to level to level, so it's kind of easier for me to read that. But pitching is just like so volatile at those lower levels that it's hard to tell. Whereas like hitting in complex from Aceball, there's actually like decent correlations that kind of match up. 69, favorite number. You have Luke Keeschel, and I have Jacob Wilson. We already talked about Wilson, so we're going to focus on Keeschel here. I love Cool Hand Luke, dude. I've got Luke at, I think, 23.
Okay.
Let me look that up real quick. So I've got Keeschel, no, 21. This is how much I love this dude. In my F scores, he rates out with a 96 contact, which is nearly league average right now if he made it to the majors. 110 discipline, 86 power, 137 speed. He hit 303, 420, 483. Oh my God, this guy's magic. You gave him a 69 ranking and he had a 420 OBP. This guy's magic right now. 13 and a half walk rate, 17% K rate. He did not play at the end of the season because he had to get Tommy John. So remember, this guy's missing basically 2 months of the season, and he still finished with 37 extra base hits, 15 bombs, and 23 steals. My comp for him is a Jordan Westberg and Matt McLean kind of like mashup as a player. I love the dude. I think he's going to be phenomenal. They're saying that he's going to be healthy for spring training, but my guess would be that we probably won't see him in the majors. And I think he's up this year, but I think that we see him maybe in July, like around the halfway point. When we look at the Twins roster, every single person on their team is injury prone. So like someone is going to get hurt, and then someone else is going to get hurt, because I think it's second right now. You've got, who do you have at second? You got Julian on the bench. And then at second, who do they have?
Brooks Lee's playing third now. Is that correct?
No, Brooks Lee is playing second. They've got Lee at second, actually.
Yep.
So they got Lee at second. And I guarantee Correa is going to get hurt. Brooks Lee's going to move over to short. Julian's going to be at second. Julian's going to strike out a bunch. Keishel's going to be lighting it up. And they're going to say, okay, this is what's happening. And they're going to move him up. I don't guarantee it. That's just my random prediction of the day. But I love Keishel. What do you think?
Yeah, I like him a lot. But this is where you start to see my rankings really divide. I'm going to shoot for upside every single time, and I'm going to negate even really, really, really strong floors for that upside sometimes. If you look at my back-to-back-to-back, it's Luke Keeschel, it's Kevin McGonigal, it's Caleb Durbin. Like to me, Keishel's probably actually the better talent out of that three in all around game. McGonigal probably has the best speed, similar contact, maybe a little bit better than Keichel at lower levels, but you just mentioned the numbers for Keichel. And then Durbin's ability to play this year right now for a team that may need him. Like, those guys are really important. And I do think there's a part of me that wants to rank them higher. For Keichel, at least, the big reason why I have him lower is just because of that uncertainty with the Twins organization. Brooks Lee's a problem. They spend a lot of money on him, big draft pick, right? Where's he going to play? They have Correa locked up to a long-term deal. I think 2026, Luke Keishel's absolutely a starter. Organizationally, he seems to be outproducing the development that they've shown over the past few years. Like, it's kind of been up and down. Brooks Lee's been decent in the minor leagues, right? Royce Lewis didn't really have a chance to show minor league ability because of the injuries. So I want to know what this looks like yet again in another season, just because that draft profile wasn't as strong as his first year real production was.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
get that.
he blew his draft position out of the water. Like,
Yeah.
not many people can do that. And I have the same concerns about Christian Campbell. Like, just give me one more year, I'll buy in.
It's because of the advanced hit tool. Advanced hit
Yeah.
tools, especially like hit tool is like the one tool where you can really set yourself apart once you are in the minors. And like that's the thing. Both those guys have like they already have like major league ready hit tools, and that's just going to propel them up against worse competition.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't matter. Maybe they don't have the power and speed of a Spencer Jones, but if you can hit, you can freaking hit. You know what I mean?
If they could just give a little bit of their contact to Spencer Jones, he might have life again.
Yeah. So 68, you have Kevin McGonigal, who you just mentioned. I have Yastinson Garcia, the password. And McGonigal, I have at 61. So I'm a little bit higher. And this is one of the guys when I was looking at my rankings who I really wanted to move up, but I just didn't know for who. Because I'm like, I like all these guys ahead of him at this point, and I'm like, I don't even know who to move him ahead of because I like all these guys so much. I just need some guys to like move off of my list, and then I can make some room for Kevin McGonigal. Maybe I could have moved him ahead of like a Jacob Mizurowski just because of the bullpen risk, like a couple pitchers or something like that. But I really love Kevin McGonigal. You already mentioned just killer hit tool, like ridiculous hit tool. Speed is there. It actually looks like this offseason he's worked on building muscle and
Mhm.
trying to increase his exit velocities, which is very interesting because when you see Kevin McGonigal of last year, you think, okay, in a full season, we have a guy who can hit 300 with 10 homers and like 30 steals. That's okay. Like if you're in Roto, great. But like, I don't like 10 homer guys. You know what I mean? I want more pop. But if he can turn that 10 homers into like a high teens homer production of 16 to 18 homers, but he's also going to hit 300 or, 280, 290 with 30 steals or something like that, then you have a really, really stellar guy. You go from an averageish, like, okay, I guess he'll be my start. He's the 10th second baseman or whatever off the board, 11th second baseman off the board, to being a top tier type player. And so the main thing for me is if McGonigal can actually translate this like offseason stuff that he's trying to do into power, he's going to be a big mover for me in the rankings. Yastin Garcia, I've talked about him a ton. Dude wants to be Manny Ramirez, right? Like he's got the dreads, he's got the swing. He literally looks like a little mini clone of Manny Ramirez, except for he's not as good. My comp from is actually Nicholas Castellanos because he has terrible plate skills, but he is super aggressive in the zone, which is what makes Castellanos successful at what he does. Is he's very aggressive in the zone and he has a good hit tool. So Garcia is very aggressive in the zone. He has a good hit tool. He has good EVs, and that's sometimes all you need. It's almost like Colby Thomas syndrome here, right? I think he's worse than Colby Thomas, but he's almost like my Red Sox Colby Thomas here, where the dude just makes hard contact. He makes it work. He's aggressive in the zone. Hit tool works for him, and he's got that profile of good hit tool, bad plate skills, and enough power to do damage.
I want to talk to you about Garcia because I came across him this year. And for those that don't know, I very much follow like Scout the Stat Line, which is ironic because of my association with Scout the Stat Line. I don't get into the underlying numbers as much as you do, and I would like to. I just don't necessarily find myself with the accessibility to it at times. But back to Garcia, I saw what he was doing this summer, maybe June or July, blown away. Maybe it was even May. And then I looked at his age and I was like, oh, age to level 21, blowing up A and high A. I was like, okay, like that kind of makes sense. Goes to AA, takes a little bit of a step back. I think he still hit around 260. So he still did well. But my question for you is, especially for my own rankings, like, do you think he comes out this season and absolutely refines that form from A in high A, like starts doing really big damage again, where it's like, okay, we can see him as a big league player now. Maybe the average and the aggressiveness holds him back as like an elite level player, but Nick Castellanos is a really good player. I guess I'm having a hard time with the age.
Yeah, I get that. See, he didn't even come really on the scene until last year.
Mhm.
So you have to remember that some players take longer to develop, like for instance, JD Martinez, Justin Turner, right? Like we have these examples of these guys that did something with their swing. And guess what? Yasinson Garcia is that type of guy. He has an Isaac Paredes profile. He has a 46% fly ball rate and a 46% pull rate.
Well,
And when he was in high A and low A, he had a 30% home run to fly ball rate. So it's all based on where he's at. And he's going to be hitting in Boston where we have the green monster. So I think this profile is just gonna turn into a doubles machine where he's just hitting everything off of the monster because all he does is pull and hit the ball in the air. And that's all he needs to do. If he can make enough contact and just pull and hit the ball off the air far enough that it hits into the green monster, you're just going to be a doubles machine. So that's like the upside play. That's like the best case scenario for Yasinson, is he is basically going to be an Isaac Paredes with better contact. I think he's got a better hit tool than Paredes. I think he would be a Paredes in Boston, like a better hit tool Paredes in Boston.
really sneaky too, kind of just what you were saying. Boston needs right-handed hitting, right? Like we know the
Mm-hmm.
lineup. Campbell should help that. But when Rome comes up, there's another lefty, Casas, Devers, right? Like they need Duran. They need a righty. Like this could be a really nice righty fit to that lineup where maybe he's promoted quicker than some might think just because they need that change up in the lineup. Because I don't know right now where they find it outside of Christian Campbell. And that's still not enough to have, that proper switch off for a bullpen not to come in and just mow you down. So yeah, I think I'm buying into the profile. If you are, I'm curious to see what he does this year. I would love to see him come out of the gates blazing hot.
Yeah, he could come up if he starts really hot. He could be a guy who's up this year. Whereas, like, if you just look at trending, he's probably a 2026 guy. But he could be a guy if he just blows up, could just come up.
Is he?
They
Do you
have a ton of
project him?
outfielders,
Do you
but
project him as a DH more, or do you think he can play in the field?
I mean, like, I think he's a left fielder. So, like, I don't think he's
Okay.
as bad even though he looks like Manny Ramirez, I don't think he's nearly as bad in left field as Manny Ramirez. So
Yeah.
I think he can make it play. Um, 67, we've got Caleb Durbin and James Triantos, basically the same dude, except Triantos is a couple of years younger, in my opinion. They've got like similar exit velocities, similar very good hit tools, similar speed skills, like very similar dudes, to be quite honest. I already talked a bit about Durbin. You and Doc love him. Like I had Durbin in my last ranking set with Doc and talked about him, so I don't really want to get too much into him here. I do like Triantos a little bit more because I think that Triantos, while they both have bad power, potential, I think Triantos is going to have a little bit more staying power because he's done what he's done. Basically, he's done exactly the same thing as Durbin, but at a younger age and at the same levels. So I think that Triantos could turn into a starter. Whereas Durbin, I think, is always going to be a super sub type guy. I think Durbin's going to be, I mean, you're the Brewers fan, but I think he's
Yep.
just going to be a guy who moves around the field. And the Brewers' hope is that he'll just be like their little version of Tommy Edman or whatever
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
team, which is good. Like, that's great. Where I think Triantos could actually be like a starting second baseman for the Cubs and get more plate appearances. And that's kind of like why I like Triantos a little bit better than Durbin, but very similar dudes. What do you think?
Yeah, Triantos is a pure omission from my list. There's always going to be a few. He happened to be one of the guys that I just undervalued, maybe because of bias, or maybe because I simply overlooked really the profile. Because when I was making the notes for the show today, you might like this, you might hate this. I actually said for Triantos, he's a dime bag version of Matt Shaw with less power. Like the price of what Matt Shaw is right now is outrageous, and maybe rightfully so. I like Matt Shaw a lot, but Triantos has equal to more speed. I would say more speed.
Yeah, more
Good,
speed.
good contact ability. I think there's power that could develop there. I don't know, but 8 home runs to 15 home runs at the major leagues. Like, sure, we're projecting 20, maybe even 25 in Matt Shaw's future, but like, we don't know. And ultimately, like, Nico Horner is a question mark there in Chicago. It definitely has seemed with some of the moves they've made that they would like him long term to be moved outside of that contract.
Hmm.
So Triantos is definitely an omission on my list. I think there's incredible value here. The question is, when does he play? Like, does
Yeah.
he turn into a Durbin? Because if that's the case, it's a disappointment, because I think he can be more than Durbin. Like you just said, there's a lot of value in Triantos. It's just where and when.
Yeah, I think it's all about that's why they were trying to trade Horner, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're trying to. So I think it's either an injury and he's up. He's probably the next guy up because he can play the outfield too. He's also played a little bit of third. So he has that ability to play multiple positions, but I think long term he's good enough to be a starter. My comp for him actually was Luis Rengifo. I think he can
Yeah,
basically do Luis Rengifo things, and hopefully he's a starter. And Luis Rengifo with 600 plate appearances is a really good player.
good player. Why do you think they would even kick the tires on Alex Bregman with Shaw and Triantos?
I think because they have Kyle Tucker there, and maybe Kyle Tucker and Bregman are bros, and they think that if they bring in
They
Bregman, they
could
might be
sign
able to sign
Tucker.
Kyle Tucker
Yeah.
long term.
Okay. That's fair.
Hmm.
And then you give up on the potential of at least one of those guys in a trade. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's my thoughts on it. And they have a bunch of outfielders they can trade too if they really want to. 66. You have Rhett Lauder, who just got some elbow soreness, but apparently he's structurally sound. So hopefully, because I just drafted him in a Otnu league, so I kind of need him. And then I have Owen Casey here, another Cub. So Rhett Lauder, I have ranked a little bit higher. I think I've got him at like 48 or something. So just a tad. It's like 15 spots is not really a big deal, especially when you're talking, pitchers and hitters all lumped together. We're probably pretty close when it comes to like total pitchers on our ranking of Lauder. Lauder is a control guy. I think he's going to be more like a number 3 starter, even though he's drafted really high. I think he's just going to be like a nice number 3 guy. He actually plays really well for the Reds or for the Great American Ballpark because he is really good at like limiting contact. He's going to be a guy that doesn't give up a ton of home runs. So I think he actually does play really well for the ballpark. But as far as like fantasy is concerned, he's not going to get a ton of strikeouts, so he might be a little bit boring. But he is going to be, an asset. He's just going to be one of those guys that you pick as your number 4, number 5 starter on your fantasy teams, not as like a top tier ace type guy that we see from our higher end starters that we're going to get into probably in like the next little grouping here. Owen Casey hits the crap out of the ball, but he's very inconsistent. He has insane exit velocities. I think like 140. He's putting up his max EV was 115.5, average EV of 90. So he hits the ball really hard. But he strikes out a lot, almost a 30% K rate. He did have 51 extra base hits. There's just like a lot of volatility in this profile where it's like he's good, he's not good, he has a good week, a bad week. And it kind of reminds me of like Cody Bellinger in that way, where it's like, is it good Bellinger, bad Bellinger? Like who's coming? My comp from was Cody Bellinger meets Joey Gallo. Where I'm like, okay, he could be really good or he could be really bad. Or maybe he is both of those guys, really good and really bad. And he's just a very inconsistent player because that's kind of what we've seen on a weekly basis from him in the minors. But I do like him more than like Alcantara and like some of these other Cubs outfielders. I just think that like there's a lot of volatility in the profile.
Yeah, and that you said it best, because our profiles, I see the same thing you do. The only difference is my slap is Jack Sawinski. And I would way rather
Yeah.
have Cody Bellinger and prime Joey Gallo than Jack Sawinski. And I'm not saying he's Jack Sawinski. My fear is that he is Jack Sawinski, who showed some incredible weeks with Pittsburgh. Like, Jack Sawinski was a guy that you pick up, you start, he sucks, you drop him, he goes off for 6 home runs, and you kick yourself. You pick him back up and he sucks again. So I want to stay away from the Owen Casey, Jack Sawinski, Cody Bellinger, Joey Gallo as much as I can, just because I've been burned. And I do agree with you. I think he's probably starting next to PCA, if not, end of this year, maybe next year, because I do think he's a big leaguer. But the question is, does he stay a big leaguer? That's kind of my take. And then for Rhett Lauder, we had heard things in the industry throughout the last year. You know how industry chatter is, and somebody passed along that Lauder had elbow damage. So I've always just been hesitant and been waiting for, when does the injury actually officially come up? Was that information true? If I get past anything, I'm always like 50-50. Are they right? Is it completely a lie?
Mm-hmm.
When it came through today, I literally looked at my phone and I laughed and I was like, well, they're trustworthy. Like,
Yeah.
so I like Louder, especially in that ballpark, which I love that you called it Great American Small Park. Um, but the injury concern is why he falls here.
Yeah, I get that. 65. This is hilarious because for 65, you have Justin Crawford and I have Josue Briseño. And then at 53, you have Josue Briseño and then I have Justin Crawford. So that's just one of those happy accidents that you can't make up. Justin Crawford, um, I guess I'm higher on Crawford than Briseño because I really like, and this is all roto dependent, right? I really like a rabbit who actually has a good hit tool and a little bit of power,
Hmm.
which is what he is. Because Doc and I last time, we went through Doc's whole rabbit tier where he had like Durbin and Chandler Simpson and like all these really fast guys that are nothing but speed all right next to each other. And so we had a midget tier and a rabbit tier on the last podcast with Doc.
That doesn't
Anyway,
surprise me.
so we had a 50. So Justin Crawford, I just think that like he's the best of these rabbit types where it's like, okay, he actually has a good hit tool and he actually has power. And his dad was a speed guy too, who actually ended up developing into a 20 homer power guy. So there could be more power in there. And he also did what he did last year as a 20-year-old. He hit 313, 360, 444 at high A and double A as a 20-year-old with 42 steals. He had more steals than extra base hits. He's really developed into a good player. When he was drafted, he was kind of like a wild card where it's like, oh, nice, Carl Crawford's son. That's cool. But is he going to be good? And I think he's proven that he's actually a really good player. And he's going to be one of these kids of the father that actually works out. Like Carl Crawford was awesome when he played, but he had also had a very injury riddled career.
Yep.
So it's very possible that Justin Crawford, if he could just stay on the field, might actually end up having the better career than his dad, which is kind of interesting to think about. Jose
Yeah.
Briseño was one of the biggest movers in Arizona Fall League, right? Like everyone talked about him, and it was like, oh, Zaire Hope or Jose Briseño. I'm the Briseño guy. I like Briseño better than Hope. I liked Briseño before the Fall League because his hit tool was insane. He had 319 as a 19-year-old. It was at Aceball, but he had 319 with a 402 OBP. So he went 345, right? And that's with only 7 homers. 319, 402, 529 with only 7 homers. That's pretty impressive to get a 529 slug when you only have 7 homers. And his walks and Ks are almost equal. Now, I looked at this guy and I was like, really good hit tool, and he's 6'5". There's probably a lot of power potential here. And then he goes off in Arizona Fall League with 10 bombs and completely takes off. And now he's like the guy, right? So, like, I was just looking at this dude being like, okay, big guy, great hit tool. Maybe there's more power in there, and then it just happens. And it's like now everyone's in on him. And this is a guy I was hoping to kind of like sneak, right, this year, and that's not happening anymore. So, what are your thoughts on these two guys?
I think Justin Crawford is the announced savior of the rabbit / speed tier that we've been waiting for, right? We wanted it to be Victor
Yes.
Scott. Some of us in the industry wanted it to be Victor Scott. We rationalized how it was going to be Victor Scott. Chandler Simpson, right? Definitely doesn't have the power that even Scott has, if Scott can ever get to it on the pull side, but does have that really good on base ability. I don't know if it's even a hit tool because like there's no power behind it, right? He finds a way to have the ball fall. Crawford has almost everything you're looking for with that developmental track record, like you talked about, where it's like, okay, age 21 season, like did he put on a little weight this year? Is the speed still fully there? Is there any more power now? And it's hard for me to rank him because I see the future, but I just haven't yet seen it all come together. But if you look back on his father's numbers, his father would be an elite fantasy player today. Like he just played in an era where offense was super hot. Right now, if you could even be 80% of your dad, you're a guy that could go in the third, maybe fourth round because it's just hard to find that overall profile. I love Justin Crawford. And then Brasino, you said everything perfectly. And I think if you don't have Samuel Basallo as a living, breathing human being in Major League Baseball, I think people would be even more excited about Brasino. But there's already a similar profile that's getting the excitement. So I think that takes away a little bit up from him. And Basallo did more at a younger age, but we need this kind of profile at first base. And I wanted your opinion on that before we move on. Like, I see him as a first baseman. Do you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
They're pretty deep too. They just got Lorenzo in their organization,
Hmm.
who's pretty good defensively. So I think that he's probably moving off, especially with how good that bat is.
Yeah.
That's a bat that you want in the lineup every day.
Yep.
So 64, you have Tink Hence. I have Dalton Rushing. Tink Hence, I'm super high on. Cardinals fan, go figure, right? But 43 is where I have Tink Hence. The injuries are the only thing holding this guy back. Like, he is a complete stud when he's on the mound. For my F scores, he's got a 108 stuff, 97 control, and a 136 FERA. So he rates out really strongly. 16.3% swinging strike rate last year, 31.2 CSW last year. He only pitched 80 innings. That
Yep.
is the thing.
Yep.
The dude is, everyone likes to say he's small, but he's like 6'1", actually. Like, I stood next to him because he signed a baseball for my kid at spring training last year, and he's taller than me. I'm 6 foot. He's taller than me.
How
So
is the frame?
he's a legit 6'1". I mean, he's like me, which is like, he's lean. Like, he's not like a skinny guy. He's just lean,
Okay.
right? Where like you're used to seeing, the thing is 6'1" for a pitcher is short now, right? But he's not small. He's not like he's not freaking Tristan McKenzie. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
he's got a leanness to him. He's got muscle on him, and he's still a kid. This dude also, he's like the nicest. This is the nicest guy that he and Mason Wynn are the nicest dudes in Cardinal spring training last year. I will tell you, like, my kid would say hi to players, and like my kid sat there saying hi to Tink Hence with Tink Hence waving back and saying hi, but for like 5 minutes, just saying hi, 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 hi. My any other kid and any other player, my son would go hi. They just walk right past him and completely ignore him, including Jordan Walker. So get your act together, Jordan Walker. Tink Hence is much nicer than you to kids. So anyway, Tink, great stuff. Just needs to stay on the field. Looks like Dylan Cease when he pitches. Has like the same exact pitches as Dylan Cease. Rising fastball. It's just literally like same profile as Dylan Cease. He's just got to be healthy. And if you remember, Dylan Cease also had some like injury problems when he was first coming up. So I don't know. I think it's just a thing where it's like, okay, let's get healthy. I think Tink is going to be a serious like number 1, number 2 starter if he can stay healthy. Dalton Rushing. I'm just going to give you my F scores for him, and that's it, because I like Rushing, but he's on the Dodgers where he's just going to be blocked because Pages is even blocked on the Dodgers. But 93 contact, 121 discipline, 107 power, 66 speed. So I like him. I think he's a really good hitter. I think he could be a really good hitter in the majors right now. I think he could be very useful to fantasy teams right now because he has catcher eligibility, but he's not going to play because the Dodgers have too many guys, and the Dodgers are going to keep signing Japanese players until they have the entire Team Japan on their team. So unless he gets traded, he's just going to get blocked until he's the next Michael Bush. So sorry, Dalton Rushing people, but that's just what's going to happen, unfortunately. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Rushing. I have him in my 40 to 50 range just because the skills are there, but Smith is locked into a long-term deal. The outfield is, they signed Conforto. Like, I get it. You're a championship team. Why depend on a prospect? I understand it, but I'm really hoping he gets moved. I think he might. Either him or Pies is going. Like, they have to figure something out unless there's a succession plan for 2026 where Conforto obviously doesn't re-sign a deal and they platoon the guys. We'll see. Tink Hence is hard. I like everything about him except that volume. We talked about it with Caden Dana. Like, love to see that. I will bump you up my rankings if you can just show me that you can pair stuff with volume. And I think the really interesting with Hence is the industry as a whole doesn't know what to do with him. I was doing an FYPD this week, 15 team. I was offering Tink Hence for a straight up 4th round draft pick in the 4th round. I had 3 teams tell me no. I got a message back after the owner took his pick and realized that I had, offered him the deal. And he's like, "Oh, I didn't see it. Can I give you a pick next year?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm going to sit on Tink Hence because he's going to skyrocket this season. And he may pitch for the Cardinals half the year if he can get his stuff together. He'll be worth a 1st round pick." So then he sends me a 2nd round pick. But think about that value. 3 teams said no to a 4th. 1 team finally sends a 2nd. This isn't an industry league. Like, it's crazy to see the fluctuation in value. And I think that's just because of that lack of volume. People don't know where to put him.
Yeah. I mean, people talk about reliever risk. I don't think so. He's gone 6 innings. I don't think there's reliever risk. I think it's mostly just he's just got to build up the innings.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think there's a reliever risk with him. It's
If
not
I'm
like
the
he has good command of his pitches. It's not a Jacob Misiorowski thing where it's like, okay, the dude can only play in the pen. It's all just
Yes.
health.
Yes. If I'm the Cardinals, I throw him out there by May. Like, and just see what he has. Like,
Yeah.
they're in a season where they need to give these guys opportunities and they need to commit to their young movement. Like, I think he has the stuff to play today. It's just, does he have enough built up, to your
He
point?
does. He does. I'm going to tell you as a Cardinals fan, I think he's not up until August because the Cardinals have all these old pitchers still
Yep.
that for whatever reason they haven't traded. Even like Passon like wrote an article today. Like nobody in the industry understands what the Cardinals are doing, keeping Eric Fedde and Steven Matz and these guys. I don't, as a Cardinals fan either, understand it whatsoever. They should trade all those guys and let Quinn Matthews and Tink Hence play,
Yes.
and Michael McGreevy and all these other, and Cooper Jerpy and all these other young pitchers that are like right there. They should let all those guys play. But hey, I don't know. They're like, we're going to go to a youth movement, but we're going to keep all these old pitchers instead of trading them for more prospects. I don't really understand that.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah. So even Cardinals fans are completely befuddled. Nobody understands except for John Mozeliak. Number 63, you have Aiden Miller. I have Jesus Made. Jesus Made, we talked about a little bit. The only thing I want to, this is the one question I'm going to ask you about Made. You have him. I have him at 63. You have him at 19, and Doc has him down at like 80. So the spread between you and Doc on Made is really interesting. And I just want to hear your take on ranking Made so high, because Doc and I kind of have the same thing where we're like, okay, and we mentioned it earlier in the podcast, DSL statistics are unreliable.
Yep.
I understand that like he has ridiculous tools, and maybe it's just you being a Brewers fan and wanting to believe that all the hype is real and bumping him up. But and it could be, but it's like I've seen so many DSL guys that get hyped and then they just dud out. And like when I see what he's going to do at Complex and A-ball, hopefully he just goes straight to A-ball and doesn't even hit
Yeah,
Complex.
he better.
But when I see what he can do in A-ball, high A, then I'll rank him in the top 20, 30, 40 if he deserves it. But until then, I just am hesitant based only on Dominican Summer League statistics.
So for me, it honestly, it lies all in what Jeff Ponce said. He's, in my opinion, he's like put his stick in the ground, not like a career defining decision here, but I've never heard him go out on a limb and speak the volumes he has about Made for anybody in the DSL. And for him to come out for a respected organization like Baseball America and rank him as aggressively as he had, it aligns with all of the things I look for. When I'm doing my top 100, I'm looking for the exit velocities, the overall athlete. Like, I'm looking for the home run lottery ticket for the most part, because that either leads to a player that I start on my team or a great, incredible trade chip. And where Madi is right now, like, talk about a great trade chip. Like, if he becomes nothing, I traded him for Julio Rodriguez. Like, people are out of their minds with value for him right now. And the last piece is, and I don't even want to say this is bias. What the Brewers are doing is the only way they stay in Milwaukee, developing and investing in their player development. Like, I wasn't sold on Jackson Trio because I was like, okay, here we go, yet another Brewer that's going to come up and have all this hype, and like, he's gonna suck. And when he came up and really showed that profile in the second half, I was like, oh my God, they might have done it. Like, they may have finally started to like really develop good players, where the days of Keston Hira are gone, right? The days of like Matt Laporta, gone. Like, the guys that were highly touted and then sucked. Matt Gamble, gone. So I'm all in. If I'm wrong, I'm cool. Like, if I'm rostering him
Yeah,
over
I like that.
anybody else, so be it. I will take that risk.
I like that. That's what you have to do. If you want him, you have to draft him there. You
Yep.
can't pick him at 63. That's just not going to happen. I have him there, but I can guarantee you in every league he'll be gone by that point if you're doing it.
Our two startups, we just did 2 30-man startups for STS. He went around 40. Went around 40. That was where his range was.
Welsh and I were joking that in the next P1 ADP draft, he's probably going to be drafted in the first round by somebody, because DeVries was last time, and then it bumped DeVries way up.
How many teams?
You have, he does like 4 different leagues. Like, I can't remember if he does 12. I think it's 12 teams, but he does like 4 different leagues for the P1 ADP drafts.
First round. I would love to see
we were
that.
talking. Someone's going to probably do it. It'll probably be Jeff Potts too.
Yeah.
63. You have Aiden Miller here. I have him at 58, so we're really close on him. I saw Aiden Miller live. I comped him to Royce Lewis with a worse hit tool. That's like what I think he is. I think he's going to move off short and be a third baseman. Just my thoughts on watching him play. When I saw him, I saw him have 5 at bats. He struck out pretty bad the first 4 times, and I was like, "Oh God, this is terrible." Fifth time, his team was winning by it was like 13-2 or something, and he stayed in the game and he hit a double, and then he got to second base, and then he stole third base, and then he like sprinted home as fast as possible on like an easy, like someone hit it in the outfield. There's like a definite run. He didn't even have to like sprint, but I just saw him sprint from third to home when he didn't have to. And I was texting Welsh when I was watching him, and I was just like, look, I was like, this dude struck out terribly 4 times. It was like starting to remind me of Roderick Arias. But then when I saw him get that hit at the very end of the game, like he could have just given up and like, it's the end of the game. Who cares? We're winning, whatever, and not tried. But he hit a double. And then I saw him steal third and then freaking sprint as fast as he can from third to home on like an easy run. And I was like, okay, this dude's a gamer. Like this guy is going to make it because like his effort level this late in an easy win, like 13-2 or whatever, is just intense and it's insane. And like this guy has drive. And so I think he's going to make it just because he's that type of guy to just keep grinding and to work as hard as he possibly can. I learned that about him. And that's something you wouldn't learn by just looking at stats. It's something I learned by watching him in person. And that actually helped improve my ranking of him. Otherwise, I would have been kind of down on him because he had a pretty bad experience at high A until the very end of the season. What are your thoughts on Aiden Miller real quick? We got to start making some good progress to end this podcast in another 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I love that story. I'm hoping he lands on the power. Like I'm hoping we have a Mark Vientos style profile here at third base for the Phillies. I just don't know. Like I didn't like the year he had, and I still think it's too early to know exactly from my perspective who he is.
Yeah, agreed. 62, you have Colson Montgomery. Welsh and I talked about him. I'm pretty down on him. I have him in like 130 or something like that. Like I've got him like really far down. Welsh is super high on him because he saw him in Arizona Fall League and he had a really good Arizona Fall League. So you probably have him like right in between my spot and Welsh's spot, which may be more appropriate. But I think I'm just kind of out on him because I think he's like all potential and like he's never realized it because he hits the ball really hard. He seemingly had good plate skills and then started striking out a ton. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on with this dude. He's like not meeting the potential of being like, and like people say every lefty shortstop is Corey Seager, right? But my thought when I watched him the first time was I was like, this is a lefty Carlos Correa. I thought more than
I like that.
More than Seager because I was like, this guy has really good plate skills. He's less hit tool, really good plate skills, and has good power but no speed. So like it was kind of reminding me more of like a lefty Correa. And maybe he's got it back. I know Welsh said he was hurt, but that's all I got on Colson. And then Cooper Pratt, I talked about last time with Doc, so I'm not really going to hit on that. If you want to listen about Cooper Pratt from me, you can listen on the last pod in the interest of time.
Yeah, Montgomery, the only reason I have him in my 60s, because I would have him lower like you do, is because he's in the White Sox organization. And if there's anywhere that you're going to get playing time and you're going to finally realize your potential, it's probably with the White Sox. But the consistency is a massive red flag.
Yeah. Got anything on Pratt, Mr. Brewer?
It was funny. Out of the draft, I was higher on Pratt than I was Batanti. Things have flipped. I think Batanti has the higher ceiling, much lower floor. I think Pratt has the higher floor. It might start for Milwaukee, but that organization is pumping out talent. He needs to take a step forward with his power this year. Do like the contact.
Yeah. I comped him to a big Ha-Seong Kim, like a very tall, like a very large Ha-Seong Kim.
Yeah. I think those numbers fit in line.
Yeah. 61. You have Marcelo Mayer. I have Kevin McGonigal. We already talked about McGonigal. Mayer, I have ranked a bit higher. I've got him at 35. I guess a good part of that is on pedigree because he's always hurt. I just think he's super safe. We already talked about Dansby Swanson. That's my comp from Marcelo Mayer. I think he's a lefty Dansby Swanson with maybe more doubles power and a little bit less actual home run power. So instead of hitting like 25 homers, maybe he hits 16. But I think he's going to hit a bunch of doubles. He could be a 40 double guy, I think. So that's Mayer for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. Like, he's just a safe guy for me, like the Dansby Swanson profile. The injuries concern the heck out of me, and it sucks. Him, Lawler, like exciting profiles out of that draft. They haven't really broke out yet, right? Lawler has, but like the injuries have really been there for Lawler too. Um, Meyer has to improve. Otherwise, I think the Red Sox are going to be an interesting like position because Cedane Rafaela is an elite level glove wherever they decide to play him. If Meyer can figure it out, it will be center field for Cedane Rafaela. If Meyer can't figure it out and there's more injuries, he may get phased out of this organization and moved.
Yeah. 60. You have Cam Collier. I'm actually pretty down on Collier. We've talked about him, I think, on both of the last two pods. I'll let you give your little piece on him, but I'm not going to talk about him. Braden Montgomery, I have at 60. You have him at 48. So you're actually higher on him than me. And my comp for Braden Montgomery is a bigger Jason Dominguez with less speed. I think he is that good of a hitter. I think that he has that much power in the bat that he could basically do similar things as Dominguez, but without the steals. Without like he'll still steal bags, but it might be like 5 or 10 where I think Dominguez could be like a 25 steal guy. But that's my thoughts on Braden Montgomery.
For Montgomery, it's funny. Like I think he's the better version of Kyle Schwarber. Very different like body profiles.
Like that.
The power. Like we forget he's coming off a two-way path in college. Like broke the ankle. That really hurt, I think, where he got picked in the draft because there were rumblings that someone might like him number one overall. I don't know that that was ever the case, but he might be a little bit later developer. Like I think because of that two-way profile, maybe we see a breakout at like 25 or 26. And when he breaks out, I think it's a big breakout, or he might just be one of those unicorns where he's been able to catch up quicker. The only concern I have is that ankle. Like how bad was that damage? And is that something that's going to stick with him throughout his career in regards to like slowing him down?
Yeah. 59. You have Jason Chorio and I have Kyle Teal. Talked about Teal last time, so I'm not really going to get into Kyle Teal here unless you have any piece for him. But Jason Chorio for you. I am super high on Jason Chorio, dude. I have Jason Chorio, and I'm going to end up talking about him next pod, so I'm not going to get too deep into him right now. But I've got Jason Chorio at number 36. I love Jason Chorio, and it's not just the name. I really think that this dude is going to be like a better version of Cedric Mullins. Like my thoughts, and I'll just give my comp right here, but I think he's like a Jackson Chorio Cedric Mullins mashup. OBP is insane. Like for OBP points leagues, like this is your rabbit. If you want you might want Justin Crawford to be your rabbit for a regular league, but I think if you're in a points league or an on base league, Jason Chorio is like the rabbit because dude can get on base and dude can steal bags. 44 steals in 98 games.
I don't even think we've started to see the end of his development either. Like this,
no.
Jason Chorio could be a very sneaky top 10 prospect end of 2025 that people really only in the industry are pointing at because I think there's more power to come.
He's adding muscle.
He's adding
muscle.
Like, and his brother is so good and like he's mimicking similar abilities with the contact, if not better. And I think we have a 2-3 time all-star here. I have him where I do because if he doesn't add the power, I'm going to go for some of the power guys over him. And I think Franklin Arias is a really good example of that, where it's like, I lean more risk, but Chorio has an incredible floor.
Yeah. I mean, there's a high ceiling in there too. That's the thing I like about Chorio so much is that he has a very high floor and he has a very high ceiling. And it's like, okay, if you look at it based on the stats, he might trend closer to the floor, but there is still so much ceiling there. And like a part of that too is like what his brother's been able to do. And like there's a chance that Jason Chorio is actually better than Jackson Chorio because he has better plate skills than Jackson. So it's like if he can do the exact things that Jackson does with better plate skills, then there you go. That's all it takes. Just hit a lot more homers, Jason. But anyway, 58. You have Jacob Misiorowski. We already talked about Aiden Miller, who was my 58. Misiorowski, I have at 55. So we're like right here in the same spot on him. Ridiculous stuff. I think, dude, that he's going to end up in the pen, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. He could be like your next Mason Miller. And like, I'll take that over like a wild Joe Boyle type starter any day of the week. So like my F scores give him a 108 stuff, an 88 control, which is pretty bad. That's like anyone with a 90, anyone with like a 90 or under control. I'm like, that guy's a reliever. So like this guy, I think is a reliever, but we saw what the Brewers did with Josh Hader. So like, if that's like the dream, right? I feel like Brewers fans, I mean, you're a Brewers fan, so you tell me, but I think that like you have to give up on Misiorowski being a starter and just accept that he's going to be your next Josh Hader or next Devin Williams and be okay with that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm right on board with that, especially with what they have with Casey Hunt, Logan Henderson coming down the pipeline. Like they have guys that are
Mhm.
give you 5 innings, quality, limit damage, limit base runners, are going to punch out a ton of guys, but are going to keep you in the game. Like that's the building block for what Milwaukee's doing with their minor league starters. If you're going to do that, you need to have a lockdown bullpen. And we've had that. Like, much like the Packers have had quarterbacks, the Brewers have had closers.
Mm.
And Mizorowski is just the logical fit after moving Devin Williams. I think McGill gives him a 2025. That's nice. If there's an injury, which McGill hasn't had a track record of full season consistency even last year, Mizorowski could step into that role if they're a contending team and could keep the job. But I think there is a very slight piece of this organization that's looking for a number one SP since Burns is gone. And Peralta is just not that guy, where they may actually, as an organization, hold on to hope longer. But they did transition him into that closer's role last year. So I do think they're leaning that route.
Yeah, I think that's the move, especially to compete this year. I think it makes way more sense to just let him play in the pen. And then if you want to Garrett Crochet it and like later move him back
Yep.
to a starter once he starts working on the control in the majors, just do it from the pen in the majors and better yourself from the pen in the majors. And then you still have like Logan Henderson to fall back on as like your next option. And Casey Hunt, who I think Henderson's probably next up before Hunt, but
Yes.
he's there still. So 57, you have Eric Batante, and then I have Colby Thomas. We already talked about Thomas. Batante, I have him like right outside of my top 150. I've got him like it's like 158 or something like that. He's right there. And reason being is that like I look at his profile and he reminds me of Owen Casey as a third baseman who is down in A ball. So like I see this and I'm like, okay, his BABIPs are all over the place. Like either they're really good or really bad. So there's like zero consistency in like what kind of average you're going to be getting with him. And then you have a bunch of walks and a bunch of Ks, and then you have a bunch of power, and then you have some steals. So it's like, okay, I look at this, I'm like, Owen Casey, Emmanuel Rodriguez playbook here as far as like what we're looking at on profile. But like I would like to see some consistency here before I bump him higher in my rankings. And that's just kind of where I'm at on him. He doesn't get the proximity bump that like a Casey does get in my ranking.
So I wanted to ask you about Batante because like I pair him with like a Lazaro Montez who gets more hype because he was coming out of DSL than complex, right? Batante's young for his draft position. This will be his age 19 season.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely has swing and miss concerns. There's no doubt about that. Do you think there's a Lazaro Montez profile here? And if you do see any similarities there, why do you think the industry is more inclined to give Lazaro more of a bump? Is it because Lazaro has answered those contact questions at least up until last year?
Yeah. So I have Montes at 24,
Hmm.
and I think that his hit tool has just been more consistent.
Okay.
The way, if you look at the seasons, it might not look that way. But as someone who writes weekly articles for Fantasy Pros on player performance, Montes was very, very consistent in A ball. And then right when he went to high A, he struggled, but then he fixed it. From August until the end of the season, Montes hit 333, 459, 604 with 7 bombs and 3 steals at high A. So he sucked when he first got to high A, but then he fixed it and was phenomenal from that point on afterward. Like literally every week he was in my like, oh, this is a top 10 guy again. That's how he was early in the season, moves up level, struggles, and then he fixed what was making him struggle. And then every week from then, consistent. So Batante, the reason is like he did not have that level of consistency. When I was doing
Yes.
weekly reports for him, it's just like, okay, he's either really good or really bad. Like, and it was just week in, week out, different, exactly like how it was with Casey. It's like, oh, Casey had 4 home runs or whatever. And then the next week he was like 0 for 40. And it's like, okay, so it's like, where's the consistency here and the performance? Which when you have an inconsistent hit tool, that makes me think like, I don't know what this player is going to be. When I see what Montes can do and how he can fit, he can adjust, and then all of a sudden he's super consistent and level and doing the same thing. That just provides a lot of confidence for me as someone to like bump him up my rankings.
No, and that was the answer I hope I got from you because I don't see that yet with Batante.
Yeah.
I'm a higher ranker on Batante than most people in the industry, and it leans right back to what I said about Jesus Mate. If there's an organization that I think can do it, Milwaukee's one of them.
Yeah.
And it lays in the hands of Batante. He's a big kid, 6'5", big bodied, right? Like he was a project. But I do think that there is development because of the age. being 19 coming in, he still has 2-3 years before we really start to say, hey, was he a bust? Should they have taken him? Could he ever figure it out? And I'm hoping the organization can really help him lean more into that hit tool, because he doesn't need to lean into the power. It is incredible raw power. Like, it's already there. So if he can take that step forward this year and have more consistency, I think we're going to see a really, really big rise in his stock across the industry. But it's going to have to play out throughout the entirety of the season, because you're right. There was a lot of ups and downs. And finally, Montez did better in rookie ball than Batanti did with even the overall contact. So he has a ways to go.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is we're going to roll through the rest of these rankings, and then we're each going to talk about a couple of guys just to pick
Cool.
out. So at 56, you have Bryce Rayner. I have Robert Kalaz, who you have at 33. I love Kalaz. It's just really hard for me to rank, someone that young, that high, with only very little A-ball experience, even though he was good, but he strikes out a ton. 55, you have Johnny Farmello, who I have like at 48 or 49, so we're right there on Farmello. Ms. Urowski, we already talked about. 54, you have Franklin Arias, who I love. I've got him, I think, at like 44. And then I have Brandon Sprout. 53, we already talked about Josue Briseño and Justin Crawford. 52, you have Noble Meyer. I love to see Noble Meyer that high. And I have Jet Williams, who we talked a lot about in our little midget tier with Doc on the last podcast, so no need to talk about him. And then 51, you have Jackson Ferris, and I have Eduardo Tate. So give me a guy here, Matt. Who do you want to talk about?
I wanted to really just highlight Tate, because he missed my list because of how young he was. And what sucks is Kalaz is literally in that conversation. Tate did better than Kalaz if you really look at things from just a numbers perspective, an age to level perspective. The only reason Kalaz gets the rating that he does, and with the production he put up, is because of the Rocky Scout winning Scout of the Year. I think it was 2023 or 2024. I love what the Rockies are doing. They get a terrible reputation in the industry. I think we're going to see a wave come up here that kind of changes the perception of what they've done. And I believe in Kalaz. But what's strange is Tate is doing a better job at a younger age.
Yeah. So Tate, putting him at 51, it's kind of like a flag plant for me, because I never rank guys like this that high. He was 17 last year and made it to A-ball. So he played complex in A-ball. The only other guy to do that in, I think, all of baseball was Leodalis DeVries. I don't think any other 17-year-olds played A-ball. And he hit between the two levels. And guess what? He had no power until like the second half, like zero home runs. So all his homers came at the very end of the season. But he hit 302, 356, 486 with 30 extra base hits, 11 bombs, and 5 steals in only 79 games. And this is a catcher. This is a catcher, and he's very good defensively too. So I think he could stick at catcher. It just depends on what the Phillies want to do at the bat. Like, this could be the guy who like, when Real Muto, by the time Real Muto is done and like ready to retire, he could just slide right into that spot. But his bat is good enough that he should be in the conversation with Basayo and Briseño and these other guys that we've already talked about. They're all Bs, I guess, the killer Bs. Ballesteros, they're all Bs. But anyway, my comp for him is a lefty version of the Contreras brothers. I think his hit tool is that good that he could be like as good of a hitter as William or Wilson Contreras, except he's a lefty. I think he's great, man. 17 years old with that kind of line, just super advanced player. Like, he's right on that Basayo track of just being really advanced age to level, great hit tool, great power in that swing.
Well, and that's what I enjoy about doing the list breakdowns. Tate's going to get some consideration as we get closer to the season for absolutely making the top 100, because he falls in line with what I want. We kind of talked about with Augustin Ramirez. I want to know there's a path to playing time. I want to see a track record, even though he has a slight one. It's a good one so far. And the contact is there. And I think you said it perfectly. Like, who's the heir apparent to JT Real Muto? And it looks like we're getting closer to that time than I think we expected when he signed that deal. Tate should fall in line with the development path, right in line with that contract ending, or that phasing out of the position. And that's what I want. Like, I have an issue with Teal because in Boston, I loved him. In Chicago, I'm like, well, Cuero's there. Like, what does that mean to have two top 100 catchers paired in the same organization? Like, that sucks. And it lowers my rankings for both. Tate, not so much. Like, he has that position just like Ramirez does. So he absolutely will get a reconsideration for me. And I do. I like to watch those kids because they are lottery tickets, right? And I kind of wanted your take on Kalaz because I do have him so highly rated. Like, what is your comp and what have you seen so far from Kalaz?
All right. So we'll end on Kalas here. My comp for him is Teoscar Hernandez, actually. Uh,
Hmm.
so between Complex and Abel, 344, 446, 633 slash. Ridiculous. 33 extra base hits, 12 bombs, and 15 steals in only 62 games. So insane stuff here. Very, he had a 23.6% K rate across both levels.
Yep.
But once he got to A ball, you saw that go up. And the swinging strike rate is pretty dangerous here. A ball, he had a 17.5% swinging strike rate. So that's a lot of swing and misses right there. That's a pretty heavy whiff rate. So I think that portends to a higher K rate than we saw. He ran really good BABIPs because he's super aggressive, right? Like super aggressive, super athletic player. So he's going to have that Adelis Garcia type profile naturally because that's just his swing tendency. That's the way he hits. If he can improve on the plate skills, you could have a superstar here. Otherwise, like you're looking at a really good, productive guy who's going to be like a big time RBI, home run, batting average machine, but he might not reach that superstar level because he might strike out too much to get to that level. But like, hey, he could be a Teoscar, so which is really good, a really good player. So the main thing for him, rein in the Ks, even though the K rate was like not terrible, the swing strike rate was atrocious. So we need to see that get better, which is like Tate did not have that problem, which is why I would rank Tate ahead of Kalaz.
No, I love that breakdown, and it does. It fits in what we've been talking about all episode. I'm going to go for the superstar, right? And
Yep.
I've seen that especially in 15-man leagues as opposed to a 20 or a 30. Like in a 20 or a 30, I'm going to definitely lean more with a safer approach. Maybe a Tate for a great example, but in a 15-man, I want as many potential superstars as possible because it's more shallow.
Yeah.
Guys on the waiver wire, you have more of a floor in case you need it. And that's just been something I think I've been finding my own footing based off playing in leagues and then adjusting that to my rankings. And it's hard when, I think I'm in 4 or 5 30-mans. You got to take a lot of what you do in the other leagues completely out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
So I find myself rostering Kalaz almost not at all in those leagues.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to call it a pod here after that. You can find Matt at Matt_E_Morris. He is, hey, your thing says that you're the co-host of Dynasty Dingers, but you're the leader. Don't let Doc push you around. Doc might be the entertainment. He might be the entertainment here, but you are the head Boy Scout, I think, of that podcast
Yes.
there.
Yes.
So, you can find Matt over on Dynasty Dingers on Statline Scout Pod. What else you got going on, Matt? Before we close up here,
that's the main focus right now. We're kind of reorganizing my long-term podcast that I've done for 5 years. We were a sports-based podcast. We're actually going to like general life advice because now that we're deep in our 30s, we're going to lean on, raising children and schedules and being productive, multitasking, like little stupid things that we actually as adults like need to lean on each other for. So there's nothing in regards to like branding that we've officialized yet, but that is something we have in the pipeline and I'm very excited for.
nice. That's awesome. That's good stuff. Just because it's not sports doesn't mean you shouldn't listen, people. Get your lives together too. Don't just get your fantasy teams together, get
That's
your lives
right.
together. So you can find me on the Twitter machine at Fantasy Aceball. Please follow the podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast, the Fantasy Aceball podcast, and also follow and subscribe on YouTube so you can also watch along. Because guess what? Spring training starts in about a week, and I'm going to be posting because I'm going to be going to a bunch of spring training games since I live here. So you're going to be getting a lot of spring training little golden nuggets from me if you follow along with the YouTube and get some visuals. Just like you'll also get like in-person video that I get from my scouting stuff while I am looking at games once the minor league season begins. So follow the Tim Kanak on YouTube for that. And you can find all my written stuff either on X or on Fantasy Pros. And that's a pod. Thanks, Matt, for coming on. Peace out, everybody. See you next time.